Soviet disk detected. To play the Allied missions, please insert the Allied disk.
Hello everyone, I'm a broken robot. Ah, fads. There's nothing more bittersweet than watching an abstract item shoot to the height of popularity only for a few months later to watch it fall into complete irrelevance. Just going off the top of your head, you can probably name a dozen fads that rose and fell in a single year. Back in 2020, grown adults that didn't even care about the hobby rushed to Targets and Walmarts in search of finding as many sealed Pokemon products as possible in hopes that one day they could pay off their kids' college. There were also fashion fads in 2022, where a mix of supply shortages and pandemic panic made makeup brands like Drunk Elephant and L'Oreal almost impossible to find, making them the ultimate status symbol. Even today, we are living in the fallout of the Stanley Cup fad dying. As of this video being made, a few weeks ago Stanley Cups sold for hundreds of dollars, and today they can be found in Goodwills for as little as $4. Fads that target adults and teens all suffer a similar fate. An early adoption period where people online or in social circles talk highly about a product, followed by a mass demand for said product. The fad usually ends in one of two ways. Either everyone interested in the product adopts it, leading to the cool factor and exclusiveness falling off its pedestal in online spaces, or like we are seeing now with the Stanley Cup fad, it became unpopular to bandwagon on this fad, leading to outgroups to ridicule or mock those who paid hand over fist for a cup that costed manufacturers pennies on the dollar. Today, however, I'd like to discuss one of the most interesting cases of a fad dying overnight, not because of outside forces or a simple fall into irrelevancy, but direct action by a unified school boards across the nation. Today I'd like to discuss the rise and premature fall of silly bands and the fad that took North America by storm in 2008, only to be dead and forgotten by 2009 caused by school board intervention. Silly bands were first created by Robert Croak, the founder of BCP Imports, a toy and novelty company based in Ohio, USA. BCP had a history of making rubber armbands and other accessory types of toys. Robert was inspired to create a line of shaped rubber bands after discovering dog-shaped bands in Japan that were designed to encourage office workers to not throw them away after use. Prior to 2008, many Chinese office supply companies made rubber bands that were turned into interesting shapes while not in usage to encourage office workers to not lose or discard the office supplies. After watching his daughter bend rubber bands into all kinds of shapes, Robert wanted to take on a different approach. He adopted the process of making rubber bands thicker by adding in multiple elastic chemicals and added unique dyes and glitter to go against the traditional black and maple color Chinese rubber bands had used in the past. After creating a small batch of animal-themed rubber bands that could be stretched for days at a time and still return to their original shape, Robert's vision changed once again. Robert theorized that the unique look of the animal outlines combined with the bright colors would make them appealing to school-aged children, but instead of being used purely as a piece of office supplies, Robert would expand the original batch of animal molds to be larger, making them the perfect fit for wrists of the average American not as a rubber band but as a fashion accessory. In an attempt to create an American version of waste prevention office supplies, Robert accidentally would go on to create the biggest fad of the late 2000s. The product was introduced in 2008 and quickly gained popularity, spreading across schools and communities nationwide. Famously, Robert would brag in interviews that he didn't need to market the bracelets at all, since they traveled by word of mouth among children. The original batches of silly bands included shapes like vehicles, animals, sports equipment, and dinosaurs. While Robert wanted the colorful bracelets to appeal to teens and young adults, their cheap price of only $5 for a pack of 24 and the social clout that came with owning rare or colorful versions of certain molds quickly cemented silly bands as the ultimate status symbol among primary school-aged children. The bands became a craze, and their popularity surged as they were traded and collected among kids across the United States. The appeal of silly bands lies in their novelty, variety, and the social aspects of collecting and trading them with friends. I recall myself personally back in 2008 watching the local news report on the fad, which would encourage myself and my brother to beg our parents to drive us to Five Below in hopes of joining the fad. Despite the seemingly simplistic nature of the bracelets, their social status was what helped the fad last well into the early months of 2009. Images of preteens walking around with sleeves of silly bands still make the rounds on image boards today, and despite the fad being dead by the end of 2009, there was a robust and competitive resale market that flooded eBay during this time. Even to this day, the urban legend of kids getting their arm circulation cut off by wearing too many silly bands still makes the rounds on some subreddits. Many have wondered, though, If Silly Bandz had this death grip on children in the United States, and their cheap price and simplistic nature made them easy for parents to buy and cheap for children to collect, why did the fad die so fast when compared to how successful the colored rubber bands were? Well, like all good things in public schools, administration has to regulate it to a point that it's not fun anymore. An interesting aspect of the Silly Bandz fad was that because the main fan base was children between the ages of 7 and 11, much like Pogs and Pokemon cards before, kids couldn't just beg their parents each and every time they came across a new desired Silly Band. People had to trade to expand and diversify their collections. Maybe you had just bought in the truck pack while your mate had the dinosaur pack, so you'd trade one of yours to get one of his. While this system led to Silly Bandz becoming more popular, it put them on the radar of authority figures as a potential distraction. Many children and young teens would take their Silly Bandz to school to trade and wear, but most importantly, to show off. In my school growing up, it was the cult of the neon blue great white shark Silly Band that only came in one expansion pack that most of us were too dumb and naive to realize. If you were willing to trade away as much as half of your entire collection for this one band, you were destined to be considered schoolyard cool for the rest of the fad. But as many disgruntled parents began to call schools complaining about their children being finessed out of their bracelets, and teachers catching students trading during class, bit by bit Silly Bandz fell out of popularity with the demographic Robert was originally trying to appeal to. When Silly Bandz first hit the mainstream, they were popular among teachers. In fact, in some counties in the United States, teachers played a key role in their spread to younger demographics, being given out as rewards and gifts for good grades. However, by November of 2008, a coalition of 17 separate school districts in the northeast of the United States pulled the plug on the fad, barring Silly Bandz from school property. While there were some attempts for Silly Bandz' popularity to branch out of the schoolyard, it was little too late. One 2010 article by the Brainchild Group reported that Silly Bandz were banned in nearly half of all school districts in the country by the end of 2009. Throughout 2009, thanks to a combination of schools banning them and parents no longer buying them, the Silly Bandz fad dropped like a lead balloon in early 2009. Some areas like roller skate parks and shopping malls were still great spots for showcasing your Silly Bandz collection, but the loss of the tight-knit hierarchy that was established out of schools made them far less collectible. And as a sea of bootleg and third-party knockoffs flooded the market in mid-2009, sales dropped by a whopping 65% nationwide, forcing BCP Imports to cancel the construction of 3 Silly Bandz manufacture sites that were planned to be built in the following year. In a last-ditch attempt to save the brand, Robert would seek a partnership with brands like Marvel and Disney in order to try and appeal to the remaining collector bases. However, ironically enough, despite the Silly Bandz fad dying in mid-2009 due to children being forced to lose interest by outside forces, a core group of young adults still collected the bracelets religiously for a while longer. But much like with Hydro Flasks and Beanie Babies before them, the fad died in popularity and one by one people forgot about the rubber bands that seemingly ran American schools back in 2008. After the commercial failure of the 5th generation of Silly Band designs that featured scented and tie-dyed colored Silly Bands, BCP Imports dropped the fashion accessory as its flagship product and branched out into new products that they had originally been producing prior to 2008. In 2010, a Silly Bandz game was released for the Nintendo DS, but it was just an Angry Birds knockoff that's more than forgettable. While today you'll find the odd Gen Zer or millennial that still wears a Silly Band or two, but most view the fad as nothing more than late 2000s nostalgia. Today in 2024, Robert Croak is still milking the final drops of success that came from the Silly Bandz line of products, in the form of selling worthless NFTs based off his invention. He is also a self-proclaimed finance guru on TikTok, which, in Robert's defense, based off his background as the lead executive at BCP Imports, it makes sense that he has a lot of knowledge about handling middleman manufacturing. When it was all said and done, Roberts walked away with $15 million in profit and was cemented as the man behind the nostalgic fad that was Silly Bandz. While Silly Bandz still exists today, and in many parts of the country are no longer banned from schools, it can't be ignored how the elimination of the schoolyard publicity destined Silly Bandz for the dumpster, like other fashion fads from the 2000s. But what do you guys think? Were you a big fan of Silly Bandz back in the day? I still have my childhood collection, but in full transparency, I haven't touched them since I was, 13. Do you still wear Silly Bandz, or do you know somebody that does? Leave a comment down below, I'm interested to hear your guys' take on the fad. But more than anything, I'm so happy to have each and every one of you here in the audience today. You guys truly make this show possible. If you like what you see, why not hit that like button? If you like the video, not only does it help me out in the YouTube algorithm, but it lets me know that you guys want more videos in this style. While you're at it, why not hit that subscribe button? If you subscribe to the channel, you won't miss my future video essays, reviews, and commentary on whatever topic of the week has piqued my interest. I hope you all have a great day, go dig up your silly Bandz collection for some nostalgia, and stay cool.